I like the way you run. Give me 5. Pretty good. Where's your brother? You're not your brother's keeper, are you? No. Of course you are. Hey, guys. Oh, there's your brother. You can come and sit by your brother if you want to. Great. It's good to see everybody today. Let's all scoot down a little bit so everybody can get up here. Yeah, there you go. Maya, come and sit on the other side so it's balanced a little bit with those pink boots. I like those. Have you ever been lost? Have you? Where were you lost? You been lost? Where were you lost? In the store? Was it scary? Was it? What'd you do? Yeah? Yeah? Uh-huh. So you got lost from your mom while you were looking at the fish. You just got wrapped up in looking at fish and forgot where your mom was. Oh. Uh-huh. So then what did you do to find your mom? Ran around the store. Is that a good thing to do? No, probably not. What should you do? Where were you lost? You didn't get lost. Well, you're pretty good then if you didn't get lost. That's great. So what should you do if you get lost? What do you think? Go back to mom. That is an excellent idea. I think that's right. What do you think, Cart? Is that a good idea? Yeah, that's a good idea. What do you guys think? Go back to mom? Yeah. What if you can't find mom? You could tell a person at the counter. That's right. Sometimes you need somebody to help you, don't you? You could just stay in one place if it's at a store. That's right. And hopefully your mom will come back around and see you where you were. What if she didn't see you? Oh, that would be scary. It's kind of scary, though, to be lost, isn't it? Yeah, she'd probably run around. Your mom would run around and find you, wouldn't she? Yeah. Why does your mom run around and find you? They don't want to be lost. That's right. Why do you think your mom wants to find you? They don't want you to get hurt. Okay. Anything else? They don't want you to get stolen by somebody. Anything else? Oh, she loves you. Yeah, that's probably the real reason why, isn't it? Did you know that some people get lost and they don't get found? And that's scary and that's sad too, because they don't have anybody to love them who loved them before. So they have to find new friends, or they have to find new people who will love them. Today, Jesus tells us a story about 2 boys. One stayed at home and one went away. And the one who went away, he took all of his money and he spent it all. And then you know what he did? He was feeding pigs. Are pigs messy? Oh, pigs are messy and stinky and awful. And they jump in mud. And you know what he said? He said, I would like just to eat their food because I don't have anything. Now raise your hands. Who would like to eat pig food? Okay, I knew you would. There's always one. It sounds awful, doesn't it, Maya? Pig food sounds gross. But he was lost, and he knew that his dad would probably be upset with him because he spent all the money and wasted it. So you know what he did? He got up out of the mud. I bet he had mud all over him, and he's just scraping all the mud off. And he said, I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go see if my dad will just make me a slave. Now, would you go back to your dad to be a slave? Or your mom? No. Albert Einstein says that human beings are part of course, he had to say time and space because that's what he talked about all the time. It's what he studied. But human beings are part of the whole universe and are limited by time and space. Now think about that. We are limited by time and space, aren't we? We have a certain bit of space that is ours, and we have allotted a certain bit of time each day of our lives, and we don't really experience the past. We experience the present always. So we're limited by that. We can't really experience the future. We only experience what we have right here. But he says, we're limited by time and space, and we think as human beings that individually what happens to each one of us, what happens to me, is the most important thing. So as I go on in life and I see all my limitations around me, all I can see is my own box, necessarily. That's what he's saying. All we see is through our limitations. And he says, until we break out of that prison, we're never going to experience the joy of compassion. Now, compassion was mentioned in this gospel. Compassion is mentioned in this story, and I have to tell you, this is both one of the most loved and one of the most hated parables there is. It's one of the most hated parables because pastors preach on it and everybody knows the story. And so you got to figure out a new way to preach it every time. But it's one of those beloved parables because we kind of like to situate ourselves in it, don't we? We like to say, well, I'm not really that dissolute son who goes out and just wastes everything. But I really don't like to be that one who stayed home and grumbled all the time either. But we like to situate ourselves somewhere in between. And we don't want to say we're one or the other because we don't really want to look in the mirror, do we? Because this parable does hold a mirror up to us. Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. And apparently, we have a very distorted view of the Pharisees. Okay, let's just get that out in the open. These guys are good guys. These guys are guards of the tradition. These guys tell you when to light the candles and how to light the candles and make sure that everything's put up right. They make sure that everything that we do in religious worship is done correctly, that the theology is right, that every T is crossed and every I is dotted. Everything is right. So in reality, these guys are right. They are absolutely, without doubt, the authorities. And so Jesus just tries to push them a little bit because they see through their limitations as well. And Jesus apparently, in Luke's gospel especially, Jesus apparently is cavorting with tax collectors, Mary. Tax collectors and sinners. And because of that, and he even eats with them. He doesn't just hang around with them, he eats with them. To eat with somebody is a big deal. To sit down, we all know that. To eat with someone is to share your life with them, is it not? It's to share joy with them. How in the world could he share joy with tax collectors and sinners? And so Jesus sits down and eats with them, and they get upset. The Pharisees get upset. And it's then that Jesus tells this story. The story of two brothers, one who runs out into a far distant country and wastes all his money, his brother says, on prostitutes. That's never said in the story, but his brother has determined that that's what he's wasted it on, because that's what dissolute living is. It couldn't have been he just went out and got drunk and then spent it on maybe dancing all night long, or he didn't have to spend it on prostitutes, did he? And we don't like to call ourselves the first son because we've never been there, have we? We've never been in dissolute living. We've never been in some place where we have wasted all the money, we've wasted all the time, we've wasted relationships. We've never ticked anybody off, have we? None of us. We've never, ever given our wife or our husband anything to be upset about, have we? Absolutely not. We're not guilty of dissolute living. We're not guilty of going off in that far distant country and doing those things that everybody else, apparently, especially the son who's back and grumbling, thinks is the worst thing in the world to do. And while he's off and he's feeding the pigs, which is pretty dirty business, we know, and he's off feeding the pigs and has no money and wants to just eat the pig slop, his brother's back and he's working day after day after day like a slave. I'm working and my back hurts and my goodness, you don't give me any thanks for anything. Now that doesn't sound like any of us, does it? I know I've never said that. And I'll bet none of us have ever said that because I know Zion's pretty well. We don't complain about I've done too much. We never do that. And yet, we have two sons who can't be reconciled with one another because all they can see is the limitations that they put up for themselves. One has put up the limitations of, these are the laws, these are the way things are, these are the way things are supposed to be, do not change anything. And the other one goes out and lives. And we want to pat him on the back for going out and getting away, but then he wastes everything. And they can't be reconciled. As Paul says in that letter that Cindy read, reconciliation is what God gives to us as this great gift. Reconciliation is what we are ambassadors of, because Christ is our reconciliation, and Paul calls us ambassadors of Christ. Now, I don't know about you, but all of us sitting here, we're not anywhere in that story. We might be closer to the father than to either one of those sons. But as I hear news or as I watch TV, every once in a while I do get a chance to watch the television. Every once in a while I hear things, probably more than every once in a while, about people pulling you this way or that way or this way or that way. And all they want is to remind us that things, that points of view are irreconcilable. I'm right and you're wrong. And especially, I just talked with Sophie the other day, and she was saying, Papa, I'm going to be happy. The radio was on. I'm going to be happy when November gets here. And I said, Sophie, I am too, because they're not going to hear any more of this complaining and election stuff. It's getting on everybody's nerves. And not only does it get on our nerves, but then it gets inside of us and we start fighting one side or the other, picking sides and saying, I'm right and you're wrong. And today in this story, Jesus is telling us something different. We're going to be right sometimes. We're going to be wrong sometimes. We're going to be that one who goes out and wastes our words and our time and our possessions. We're going to be the one who stays at home and does all the right things and makes sure every T is crossed and every I is dotted. And yet, we don't have to argue about it, do we? Jesus tells us in this parable that he gives to us that the Father saw the Son when he was far off. How far off was he? I don't know. He was far off, and before he even came up the road, and I imagine this, I imagine the old man is standing out there on his front porch day after day after day, hoping that the son will just come home. I don't care what he did. I just want him to come home. And he's waiting and waiting and waiting. And if they had binoculars back then, I'm sure he'd have had them hanging right there at the door, watching so he could see the very moment he turned the corner and came down the road. And as soon as he did, his insides nearly splashed out with compassion. He ran and he grabbed him and he kissed him. And all the son could do was get out, "Father, I've sinned. I deserve to be a slave." And his dad's not even listening. His dad looks around and says, "Go get him a robe and go get him a ring and go prepare the food. It's time to party. My son is home." Do you feel the joy in that story that Jesus is sharing? Do you feel the compassion that God has for us? I've been told that whenever you hear parables like this and there's an old man who represents compassion, or there is a gardener or a vineyard owner, you're never ever to situate yourself in that and to say, "I want to be just like the Father." But I think that the Son comes home in order to show us how to be more like the Father. In order for you and me to be able to spill out with compassion as much as He does. Because you see, the Son is changed. He comes home, his dad puts the robe on him, puts the ring on him, gives him food. He has not had this in probably weeks. We don't know how long according to the story. Who cares? It's been too long. And the Father says, "You're always welcome here in my arms." And that's the way God is with us. And isn't that good news for us? To know that even in those dissolute moments in our lives, whenever you act like the dirty, stinky, smelly son who goes out and feeds pigs and doesn't care about life. It can't get any better. It's always going to be this bad. Isn't it good news for you to know that God runs to you? And I think the reason He runs to him is because He knows the boy's going to lose his nerve if he doesn't go grab him and bring him back. And that's the way God is with us. He grabs us and brings us back because He knows we'll lose our nerve. Or those moments whenever we just stay in place and we say, "By God, this is the way it's going to be and it will not change." The Father doesn't get angry. He just looks and says, "All that I have is yours." But we had to celebrate. We had to celebrate. The time is always here. For you, you always have everything you need. I don't know about you, but that's good news that I can share. To tell people that God does care for us, even, maybe especially those of us who go out and do the things that we're not supposed to do. And maybe God has a really special place in the divine heart for people like that. Not that God doesn't love those of us who do follow the rules and do all the right things, but God has a very special place for those sinners. I think that I can love a God like that. I think you can too. That's a God who loves prostitutes and tax collectors and sinners of any kind. That's good news to share with the world. Thanks be to God. Amen.